Hello friends, this is the Legends podcast, and today, along with my producer, Mr. Veselin Vълчев, hey, nice to meet you, we are hosting a special edition of our podcast dedicated to Hungary, and we have the honored guest, Mr. Zoltán Koskovics. He is the Geopolitical Analyst in the Center for Fundamental Rights. Those are the European partners of CPAC, the guys who are organizing CPAC Hungary. It's a very important European non-government organization. So hello Zoltán, nice to meet you.
Hello Georgi, it's great to see you again. Thank you for having me, and greetings to all your esteemed viewers.
Thank you for your time. First of all, can you briefly introduce the Center for Fundamental Rights? Who are you people?
Okay, so the outfit, the Center for Fundamental Rights, is 12 years old. So it was founded in 2013. It's basically a garage startup with the three people who are now the directors of Center for Fundamental Rights, Miklós Szántó, Péter Törcsi, and István Kovács, and only one employee. Yeah. By now, we are one of the largest institutions in Hungary as a legal think tank and a political think tank. Back in the late teens, 20-teens, we started reaching out to our European partners first, and then to our American partners. And in 2020, we struck an agreement with the American Conservative Union to host the first ever CPAC on European soil, CPAC Hungary. Then COVID a little bit interfered, but eventually the inaugural European CPAC Hungary, the first edition, was held in the spring of 2022. And ever since, we have had a CPAC Hungary here in Budapest every year, every spring. And we are going to have one next spring as well. So you are all very welcome to join our Bulgarian conservative friends. And it's a very exciting time to be here in Europe, and it's a very exciting time to be conservative. So if you'd like to join us at CPAC Hungary in the spring.
It is. I will. Thank you for the invitation. That's actually how we met years ago.
Yes.
So our cooperation and the fact that you guys reached out to us was the beginning of our relations, and it's growing and growing and growing. These days, Hungary, Budapest specifically, once again came into the center of the world media attention and the news once again, with the attempts and future, so to say, intentions of President Trump to once again do one of his very important meetings, maybe the most important one that the world, especially Europe, is waiting for, one with President Putin. And Budapest was somewhat logically chosen to be the area of such meetings, and you Hungarian people and your organizations to be the host of it. How come Hungary and Budapest became that important in international politics in the recent years?
Mm-hmm. So the host is going to be the Hungarian government, so sure, Prime Minister Viktor Orbán. We are all very excited here at the Center for Fundamental Rights, but unfortunately, despite many attempts to invite President Trump to CPAC Hungary, one day that's going to be hopefully successful. The Budapest Peace Summit is a completely different story.
Yep.
Okay, so first important thing is that we are all sitting on the Trump roller coaster. That just has to be accepted. Donald Trump looks to the outside world as a very impulsive politician, which in reality he's not. He is a person who calculates all his steps way ahead. And this image of him being a very impulsive is a diplomatic tool that is, well, actually quite familiar and has long traditions going back all the way to Richard Nixon in the United States. You bear in mind, whatever happens, whatever piece of news you hear, remember that you are sitting on the Trump roller coaster. He knows what he's doing, but you might not. So first things first, very important that the Budapest Peace Summit is going to happen. And basically, the people who decide when it's going to happen are the presidents of the United States and Russia. Of course, the Hungarian leadership will have a say in the small details, but basically the decision when it's going to happen is going to be made in Washington and in Moscow. Now, we have confirmation from Caroline Lewitt last night. We also have confirmation from President Putin yesterday afternoon that the Budapest Peace Summit is going to happen. We just don't know when it's going to happen, and it's probably not going to happen in the next couple of weeks or even couple of months. Both sides have explained, Donald Trump and the Russians, that they are very interested in having a productive summit. So they want to be able to come out of the summit, meet the press, and deliver on some very important progress in ending the war in Ukraine.
Yep.
And that is our hope as well here in Hungary. So probably all of your viewers remember Reykjavik, the famous and very successful summit between Ronald Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev. Decades later, we still remember the name, we still talk about that summit. We are all interested in having a summit exactly like that, a summit for the ages where peace is either achieved right away or the entire process is set on a path that would lead to the end of the conflict in Ukraine within a very short period of time. So that's the hope, that's the ambition. We Hungarians will, and have already, but also will in the future, do everything that we can to make sure that peace happens as soon as possible, but that it is a sustainable peace that will not end basically in a frozen conflict that can be renewed at any moment in the future. That is our core interest, and we are going to give every assistance that we can to the great powers who are in charge of the peace process. That is our ambition, and that is what we are going to do. Despite many attempts to sabotage this peace process, mainly from the so-called coalition of the willing, but also from Ukraine itself. Unfortunately, it does not seem like Mr. Zelensky is interested in ending this conflict. That has a relatively simple explanation. If the war is over, in a very short period of time, he's going to have to hold elections. Yeah. And he is absolutely going to lose those elections. Yeah. So at the very least, his political survival is on the line and is tied to the conflict going on. This is a very unfortunate situation because the country's, Ukraine's leadership has diametrically opposed interests with the people who actually live in Ukraine, who want this war ended, who need this war ended. And although it's difficult to trust public opinion surveys in a country that is at war, but when we see results like this, we are inclined to trust them. So according to recent polling, the Ukrainians actually are okay with giving up territory in exchange for a sustainable peace. Unfortunately, Mr. Zelensky does not seem to be in that mood. And unfortunately, he is actively being supported by the leaders of the so-called coalition of the willing, who are also sticking to their guns due to quite selfish political reasons.
Let's put all of this into a little bit of historical context. What are the general issues between Hungary and Ukraine, because of which, from time to time, you look like, and of course, all the European leadership, you know, the European status quo, the European establishment is oftenly accusing Hungary of being pro-Russian and of being anti-Ukraine. What are the issues back in the days before the war started between Hungary and Ukraine, these two countries?
Okay, this is a very complex issue, and it is very important for your viewers to understand this bit, because this is where you come face to face with the most outrageous lies that are spread about Hungary, and we are sort of used to having lies spread about us for the last, well, over a decade now. So that's kind of how it goes. That comes with the territory of being on the side of common sense against Brussels' liberal dogma and ambitions to create a technocratic empire that they call the Federal Europe. That's the big picture why there's a lot of lies about us. Now, with regard to Ukraine, the accusation that Hungary is somehow pro-Russian is quite absurd on all levels, but especially on this level. I'm going to say something that a lot of your viewers may not like, but if they live in Bulgaria or are Bulgarians themselves, they will understand the logic of it, because everybody in this region understands the logic of what I'm going to say now. If you sit in a Budapest taxi and talk to your taxi driver about the war in Ukraine, there's a over 90% chance that he's going to say that this is a stupid civil war between Russians with an accent and Russians without an accent. I understand fully that it's quite hurtful for Ukrainians to hear this, but this is the general perception. So we do not very much distinguish between Ukrainians and Russians. An accusation that is often leveled at Hungarians, and given that we are so close to the anniversary of 1956, the revolution, we celebrated it yesterday on October the 23rd. The accusation is how is it that we Hungarians do not understand what the Ukrainians are going through when we had 1956?
Yeah, you don't have sympathy, you don't have empathy, you don't have compassion, they are the attacked ones, and etc., etc.
Yada, yada, yada. Now, understand the point, because it's important. Those were Soviet troops. At least 30% of those people in those tanks were Ukrainians. Looking from Budapest, Ukraine was one of the heartlands of the Soviet Union. Ukrainians are responsible for the crimes of the Soviet Union. For us, the idea that we should support one post-Soviet state that belonged to the heartland of the Soviet Union against another post-Soviet state that belonged to the heartland of the Soviet Union just because they are having a fight between each other is illogical, silly, outrageous. Now, the logic that Russia was the party that attacked Ukraine, that is understandable. And that requires a certain response. And we delivered that response that was needed. In this situation, when there are no treaty obligations towards Ukraine, we are not obliged in any way to risk the safety and security of Hungary for a country that we have no treaty obligations to. What we do have as a moral obligation, and a legal one, is to assist in a humanitarian matter and to create safe passage and safe haven for refugees running away from the war. Now, your viewers will be aware that Hungary is not a fan of migrants. But throughout this war, we have helped well over 3 million Ukrainians escape the war because they are indeed refugees running away from a war. We also mounted the largest humanitarian operation in the entire country's history, Hungary's largest, both on the state level and both as private initiatives. This is how we help them. Furthermore, the fact that the Ukrainian-Hungarian border has been demonstrated to be weapons-free, so there are no weapons systems going across the border from Hungary into Ukraine. It has made the region beyond our borders, Transcarpathia, one of the, if you can say it like that, the safest regions of Ukraine. There were some attacks by the Russian Air Force in this region. I can recall 3 of them. Only one was a major attack in over 3.5 years of war. This means that the various aid organizations, like Red Cross, but also many others, can safely pass through the Hungarian-Ukrainian border and deliver much-needed humanitarian aid to the Ukrainians. None of this is being appreciated either from Kiev or from Brussels, and that's part of the problem. Now, the differences between Ukraine and Hungary that contribute to the current tense situation between Kiev and Budapest is that there is a relatively large Hungarian minority living in Transcarpathia.
Yep.
Part of the reason we are not letting weapons through is because we want them to be kept as safe as humanly possible in a country where there's a war going on. There's another problem. The Ukrainians, and this is going back forever. Before the Ukrainians, it was the Soviets. They don't treat the Hungarian minority with the respect that they deserve. And in recent years, since the mid-2010s, the Ukrainian government has been sniping at the local rights, the minority rights of the Hungarian citizens. The Hungarian people living there, they are citizens of Ukraine. Some of them are also citizens of Hungary. And one of those examples, there are many, but let me just draw attention to one, is that they have changed the language law and the education law in order to prevent Hungarian kids from learning in their native language in Ukraine. That is a major sticking point. But it's important to understand that whatever differences there are between Ukrainians and Hungarians, this is not the major issue here. The major issue is geopolitical in nature, security in nature. This war that was started by the Russians in 2022, in February, is deeply and profoundly against Hungarian interests. There is virtually no outcome that would suit the Hungarian national interest.
No happy ending for you.
No happy ending. A total Russian victory is obviously horrible for Hungary. We want to have a buffer state between Hungary and Russia. Everybody understands that. But why is it that a total Ukrainian victory would be bad for Hungary? Well, first of all, it's a daydream. There's never going to be a total Ukrainian victory. So people should abandon the impossible. Stay realist with regards to conflicts. But if by some magic wand the Ukrainians could tomorrow take back all their lands, then what we would have is an ethno-nationalist Ukrainian state armed to the teeth with hundreds of thousands of soldiers who are angry, triumphant, war veterans, and that is a security nightmare for Hungary. So that outcome is also bad for our national interest.
It is.
If there are no good outcomes to a conflict, the only course of action for any rational thinking government is to hope and try to end it now, right now.
Yep.
And that's what we've been doing since February 2022.
Is this the main issue, the main reasons for some tensions and negativity and skepticism between both countries, the Transcarpathian region and the compact Hungarian minority that lives in that region? Those are people who are speaking Hungarian, they feel themselves Hungarians. They are dressing differently than the locals, they look differently than the locals. And so this is the main issue between these countries even before the war started.
This was the main issue before the war started.
Yep,
we expect our neighbors to treat with the Hungarians living on their territories at least as well as they treat their own citizens with the same rights as their own citizens. And we like when our neighboring countries offer cultural autonomy to Hungarians, and we have managed to get to this point with every one of our neighbors, even Romania, except Ukraine. So that was the core issue before the war started. But when the war started, it suddenly became, instead of a cultural issue and a civilizational issue of maintaining close contact between the Hungarian minority living there and the mother country also defending and protecting, safeguarding their rights, their minority rights that should be afforded to them as Europeans living in a European country. After all, Ukraine is supposed to be a European country. But that's before the war. After the war started, the core issue has become the war itself. We want it ended, and the Ukrainian leadership does not want it ended. And that is the main sticking point. Zelensky wants to fight this war for as long as he can, because he loses power if the war ends. And when he loses power, Ukraine is not a safe place for failed presidents.
Well, we'll see, but we'll talk about Zelensky in a second. But the last thing you said and the things that you said a minute ago regarding the world after the conflict is ended, after the war, is this actually the reason for this very strange, from European perspective, policy of Hungary towards Ukraine? Because not many of our viewers know, but Hungary is the state that financed the reconstruction of the schools, the kindergartens, the hospitals in Bucha. And at the same time, more and more often you see headlines like Hungary is blocking the military aid to Ukraine again. And sometimes people think, the ones who have this information are saying, okay, wait a minute, why are they helping them rebuild their schools, rebuild their kindergartens, rebuild their hospitals, rebuild the whole area of Bucha, and in the same time they are not supplying them with arms in order for them to be able to protect themselves? Why is that difference, and why more and more often we are reading these headlines? Hungary is blocking the military aid to Ukraine again.
Well, we have blocked the military aid to Ukraine from the start because we don't believe that this is the way to go. Now, the two things are connected, actually. It's never acknowledged that Hungary, as I mentioned, has mounted the largest humanitarian aid operation in our history to help the Ukraine. It is simply not acknowledged at all. It was last acknowledged maybe in the summer of 2022, and nobody in the mainstream press ever talks about that. So that paradox isn't even raised in the mainstream press, because then the readers, the audience would start to think that there might be some reason here. So the reason that we are not agreeing to military supplies to Ukraine through our territory is very clear. We want to keep Hungary safe and secure, and we have to, and we want to keep Transcarpathia as safe and secure as it's possible, obviously, given the war. The second situation, the humanitarian approach, is connected to why we are against the European Union or NATO as a whole supplying weapons to Ukraine. Now, you have to remember that there is no way Hungary can stop Germany or France or Italy or Bulgaria from supplying weapons to Ukraine. And we are not trying to. It's none of our business. You do you, we do us. If you want to supply weapons, do, just not at our expense and not at any risk to the Hungarian security. That's point one. The second, we don't think it's a good idea to supply weapons to the Ukrainians. Why? Because if you look at the state of this war, this is a war of attrition. As a war of attrition, it's going to last until one of the key components of fighting this war runs out. That is money, war material, and men. That's one thing. The second thing,
the more the guns, the longer the conflict.
Absolutely, it's basically as simple as that. But let's connect that to the humanitarian aspect. The way that this war has been set up, and I don't see any way or any opportunity to change this, is that it's going to go on until the Ukrainian front collapses. The war of attrition is not about gaining territory, or strategic locations can be important, but it's about attriting. And that's a sophisticated euphemism for killing people. That's the aim of a war of attrition. So the longer it goes on,
weakening the enemy.
The more people will die. And the way this war has been going on for 2 years now, ever since the failed Ukrainian summer offensive, is that the Russians are advancing very slowly and killing the Ukrainians quite fast. And of course, the Russians are also dying. Their lives are also valuable. I understand if some Ukrainians do not think that way, but allow me to say that their lives also.
No, we are all human beings, so all lives matter.
Yeah. And in the end, the outcome of an attrition war between Ukraine and Russia is not in doubt. So the only thing that can be achieved by supplying more money and more weapons is to prolong this war. More people on the Ukrainian side die, and on the Russian side as well, and Ukraine loses more territory. That is, if something, it is anti-human. It is the opposite of a humanitarian approach to this war. And it's the opposite to the approach that the Hungarian government has taken since the beginning.
Yeah, every war is anti-human, so it's a tragedy that the whole thing actually happened. But first, yes, President Trump's declaration in the past days showed that the meeting is only postponed, and he said precisely what you have formulated very well in your intro, that he is looking for results, not yet just another meeting, but a meeting that will have results, and he is not going to make it until he feels that the other side is ready to deliver. He doesn't want to do just another meeting and somehow look funny again if they agree on something and then it doesn't happen, because he is not a guy who likes that. But regarding no one is. Regarding the delivery of guns, President Trump's main philosophy for peace is the main goal of his whole second term. He is trying to end conflicts all around the world and deliver peace to different people and different nations all around the world. And so far he succeeded many times. But the main philosophy of his peace policy is peace through strength. A strength means that you are heavily armed, that you are well equipped, and you are generally, being a nation of course, not someone who is a good idea to mess with. So
Absolutely.
how can we as Europeans provide strength to Ukraine so they can negotiate, and President Trump also can support and will support the process of achieving peace with Russia?
Oh, do you want the short answer or the long
strength.
answer?
Oh, whichever you prefer. It's a podcast, so we have all the time in the world. But yeah,
The short answer is you can't. There's no way. European weapon stockpiles are empty. The only things that Europeans still have are very expensive precision weapons. And this war has shown us many things. One of those things that it has shown us is that if very expensive precision weapons could decide this war, then the Russians would have already won. Yeah. Because they have had a huge advantage on sophisticated, precise weapons in this war.
President Trump also used that with the Tomahawks these days, where he said, I told Putin, do you want me to give them Tomahawks? And suddenly he now agrees to a meeting. So they might feel the threat from these long-range precision weapons.
Now, if that were to happen, how many Tomahawks will... it's a hypothetical. It's not going to happen, by the way. But it's hypothetical. How many Tomahawk weapons would the Americans spare?
Yeah, at what cost? And at what cost?
I don't think more than 100. It's not going to change the course of the war. It cannot change. Well, the Russian response might change the course of the war.
Yep.
There's been several moments in this war when, according to American reports, published CIA assessments, memoirs from Kamala Harris, for instance, and other leading American politicians, there were several turning points in this war where the Russians were close to responding with devastating force against the Ukrainians, which they have so far used restraint. Sending Tomahawks to the Ukraine would be another such turning point, and I don't know that anybody wants to risk that, and I don't honestly think that Donald Trump wants to risk this. Never forget that the Russians can end this war.
The funny thing is,
the fact of life.
Yep, and the funny thing is, and the funny thing is that
you don't want to cross that red line. It would be horrible for Russia, obviously, but it would be horrible for everybody else. But most horrible, it would be for the Ukrainians. This is something I would like your viewers to understand, that those people who advocate for continuing this war are not the friends of the Ukrainian people. Because the people who are suffering the consequences of every round of escalation are the Ukrainian people.
Yep.
If you think that most of the casualties are soldiers, well, so far most of the casualties are indeed soldiers. But these soldiers used to be taxi drivers, hairdressers, and kindergarten teachers just a few weeks before they found themselves on the front lines. This is a conscript army. We've all seen the very heartbreaking videos of people being forcibly taken off the streets.
Yeah, it's not that they found themselves on the front line; they were sent there by strength and violence.
Yes, and the other thing is, I said so far most casualties were soldiers, but and so far the Ukraine has barely managed to survive 3 winters of this war. Will they survive the next one?
Yep.
Especially given the fact that the Russians have gained a significant advantage in strike drone capability. They are launching swarms of 500, 600, 700 drones in their major attacks these days. I don't see how you can counter that with precision weapons like Tomahawk missiles. The risk of a Tomahawk is much greater than the potential gain from giving the Ukrainians these Tomahawks. And when you think about what the coalition of the willing, so let's not just talk about the Tomahawks, there's talk about the Taurus, the German cruise missile, also quite a precise, expensive, and powerful weapon. They are not looking at this stage at World War III, or a Russian strike on Germany if the Germans deliver Taurus, but they are looking as a first stage response at devastating strike on the Ukrainians, very likely on the Ukrainian energy supply. right now, the Ukraine used to be an electricity exporter even in the second year of this war. Imagine that.
Yep.
And before that, it was one of the major electricity exporters on the continent. Right now, they are buying about 80% of their electricity from abroad, and about half of that, by the way, from Hungary. So here's another issue. Are we not helping the Ukrainians? We are selling them about half of their imported electricity, and we are also selling them an undisclosed but large amount of diesel fuel.
Yeah. Someone might say that you are profiteering from your neighbors, but as I know how difficult it is,
reduced prices, and they very much need that electricity.
Look, don't worry. We are.
By the way, you are paying for it, Georgi.
We are profiteering from you, so it's we are delivering natural gas to you, so we are profiteering from you as well. So I know how you feel. But apart from all the jokes, maybe that's something that actually is an information that the American side is also considering, and that's why it seems like President Trump did a step back, because one of the things that people are not realizing, especially the ones who are not experts in the military field, is that you cannot just give someone a Tomahawk missile. You have to operate it, and actually you have to launch it, and you have to give it its coordinates and where it is supposed to hit. So actually they will not, if they ever, but they will not just give the Tomahawks, they will operate the Tomahawks, which is a completely different story, and this will be a direct involvement in the United States in this war, in such war, in any war. Because if you give me a Tomahawk missile, good for you, I'll probably look for someone to buy it, because I cannot do anything with it. It's not something that anyone can operate. It requires tons of equipment and expertise and so on and so forth. So they are not, if they ever, just giving the Tomahawks. They will have to operate them, and maybe that's why President Trump made a step back, just used them as a leverage, but then didn't actually deliver so far.
So, first of all, yes, a Tomahawk is not actually the version that the American Indians used in the 19th century. A more sophisticated weapon than it used to be. Two things here. Whenever a sophisticated piece of equipment, NATO hardware, is transferred to Ukraine, by the time we are given the facts that they have been transferred, the Ukrainian personnel has already been trained. So I would be expecting that the training in terms of how to use the Tomahawk missiles began about a year ago. So this program has probably been ongoing, if this is at all a serious concept of giving Ukrainians Tomahawks. If it's not a serious idea, and that there's a lot to say for that this is just basically a bluff. But if it is a serious idea, they've been training the Ukrainians for quite some time. It's technically difficult to operate these machines. They are mostly sea-launched, the American versions. You have to change them into land-launched versions. Or you can, I guess, give the Ukrainians a frigate of the U.S. Naval forces, but I think that's quite unlikely. That's one. So that we are always kept in the dark about this until the weapons actually appear on the battlefield. The second part is that you mentioned that these cannot be operated without Western personnel. They don't have to be American, by the way. The Brits can operate them just as well. And the Brits are the usual suspects in these situations all the time, not the Americans. That has been the case since virtually late 2022. The moment they started, even before that, because quite frankly, some of the javelins, the Brits had to be working with the Ukrainians on those weapons. So this issue has always been there. And indeed, if you want to push this, then it's a casus belli. Because if a third party is involved in a war between two nations, to the extent that is providing targeting information, it is providing intelligence information that leads to strikes, if it is training the Ukrainian military on the ground in combat conditions, if it is demining in combat areas. If it is operating, for example, the Patriot systems, there are question marks about that. Then these are all things that one can say that they are casus bellis. But that is a political determination, and the Russians have decided not to make that political determination. This is once again brings back to the previous point I raised, that these people who are helping the Ukrainians defend themselves do not care about Ukrainian lives, because their assumption, and I think there is a correct assumption, that if the Russians are going to escalate drastically, the first step of this escalation is going to be against the Ukrainians. So they feel relatively safe sitting in London, Manchester, Paris, Berlin, and in some of the American offices where the deep state still resides.
Yeah, but there's also a strong logic there as well, because you arm them, they start to push back, the Russians see that they cannot achieve their military goals, and then Ukraine is not falling but becoming stronger, so maybe one day they will give up and there will be peace through strength. So there's also quite a strong logic behind this weaponization of Ukraine.
This is not what recent history teaches us. Well, the parallel that many allude to is Afghanistan. It's painful parallel for our American friends as well as our British friends, not just the Russians who are threatening Europe's peace. But if you recall, then Afghanistan went on for 9 years, almost a decade. And Afghanistan wasn't Ukraine. Yeah. Ukraine is a very specific place for the Russians, not just strategically, although strategically, obviously, read Brzezinski's book if you want to know what the strategic value of the Ukraine is, but also emotionally. Yep. The Russian leadership can drive the Russian population into extra effort for regaining control over Ukraine or parts of Ukraine that they had no chance to mobilize when the war was about Afghanistan. Some, goat herders in a mountainous desert region. So do not expect the Russians to just say that, okay, this is costing us too much. The expectation should be that if it starts costing them too much, they are just going to end the war, and we don't want that.
Yeah, in a drastic way. But yes. Afghanistan is not serving as the best example. Actually, it's the worst example, because after all the American soldiers who lost their lives there, what happened at the end is that the Taliban received $1 billion gift in military equipment from the American government, and this disastrous withdrawal there in the Biden term, which was basically, it was a huge mess, and it was pitiful watching it. The whole thing
certainly emboldened the Russians.
Yeah. The whole thing was a major disaster. So yeah, Taliban is the worst. Afghanistan and the Taliban are the worst possible example of how military interference might actually end up to something quite the opposite of what your initial intentions were. And the history there is this: they went there to battle the Taliban, and then the Taliban took the whole country, plus the weapons, plus the military bases, plus the Humvees, plus everything. It was a disaster. People jumping from the planes and everything. No, it was a disaster. But getting back to Hungary and Ukraine, people who are more familiar with the details are once again cherry-picking some of the facts to criticize Hungary from the European democratic point of view, saying that yes, you have an ethnic minority in the Transcarpathia region, part of it is in Ukraine now, your people live there, they are Hungarians, fine, okay, you want to preserve their lives, provide their safety, and so on and so forth, but bending the knee to a dictator, to a violent person as Putin is a big mistake. Don't do that. We understand why you're doing it, but it is the wrong thing to do. Bending the knee to a dictator.
Who's bending the knee?
I don't know. Just staying silent and trying not to make him angry and trying not to make your people target there. if someone wants to criticize you, this detail is also helping in a certain way.
Those people who say these things, not just about Hungary, by the way, this argument is out there in other European member states where there's a public discussion about how much my country should support the Ukrainian war, Czech Republic, for example, or in Slovakia, but also increasingly in places like Germany and France. There is this argument, and the argument is that you cannot bend the knee to
in Bulgaria as well. There are huge discussions here, you know, pro-Russia, pro-Ukraine, and so on and so forth.
Listen, those people who make these arguments care a lot more about Russia than we do, a whole lot more, and they are a whole lot more afraid of this Russia than any of us. I mean, why are you so afraid of a Russia that can't end this war in a satisfactory manner in 3.5 years? Why are you people panicking? Who is even talking about bending the knee? Don't bend the knee to nobody. Build up your own militaries, create military-industrial reforms at home, and prepare for the geopolitical crisis of the 21st century. We are smack down in the middle of it. Do that. Invest in your own defense. Build up your deterrence. That is how you resist pressure from outside, whether from a tyrant or anybody else. It doesn't really matter who's trying to pressure you. The point is not to give in to pressure. And that's what you need to do. But are they doing this? The only two countries who are actually serious about military capacity over the last 3 years has been Poland, primarily, and my hats off to them, even though I don't particularly like the Tusk government, and he didn't start it, but credit to him, he has continued the military reform in Poland, and Hungary. Italy, Spain, not even France or Germany, they haven't done anything. One of the reasons our stockpiles are so empty is because they didn't even decide to partially move on to a war economy to produce more supplies. They aren't doing that, and if they aren't building up their own militaries, then how am I supposed to believe them when they are saying that, oh, they are so afraid of the tyrant Putin that he's going to march all over to Paris and Berlin, all the way to Lisbon? How am I to believe them when they do nothing to increase European deterrence? Besides talk about this, because they talk a lot about this, but they haven't done anything.
It's a good point, because if you see their statistics on a nation level and state level, how much they are spending on defense, it's not that impressive. Germany, for example, yes, Poland is doing a lot, Hungary is doing a lot, Romania is doing a lot, Bulgaria is spending times more than the infamous 2% of GDP for defense. So yes, we are doing a lot because we've been, as you have been, occupied by the Soviets. We remember the old days. Those are not good memories. So yes, we are doing our best to make them never happen again. But regarding the case with Zelensky, there was this period, especially before the Tucker Carlson's interview with Putin, where the world was openly sympathizing to him. Doesn't matter whether if you like the guy or not, but yeah, he was the victim. They were the attacked people. You know, the bad dictator suddenly decided to attack them and tries to occupy them, which is a fact. And then the Tucker interview with Putin came, and then the MAGA movement started to heavily, through Tucker Carlson at the beginning, but then a lot of more people started to forcefully push on this dictator narrative, the dictator propaganda. He is a dictator, he is not properly elected, he should appoint elections, he's postponing the elections all the time, he's not a legitimate president of the state, he is a dictator, he is holding on to power with force and using the war as an excuse. And this thing became pretty big within the MAGA movement, and I've heard and seen a lot of people repeating that. What's your stance on that, and what's your stance on Zelensky personally, and has it changed since the beginning of the conflict?
Okay, so there wasn't a single turning point, I think, in this. The American left and right started out supporting Mr. Zelensky's efforts to defend his country almost equally. There were always people, both on the left, American left, and the American right, who sort of kind of understood that this is going in a very bad direction, and we should probably sit down and think about this. But they were the minority, and this is how it started out. And then over time, attitudes changed, both on the left, on the right, and in the middle with the independent voters. In the left, you saw the least fast credibility loss for Mr. Zelensky in the American society, but he's lost some credibility even with staunch Democratic voters. The independents started losing their faith in Mr. Zelensky by the end of the second year of the war. And about that time, it was first noticed with the conservative voters as well. And then that sped up with the conservative audience. So it is very clear that it's on the right where Zelensky lost most of his credibility. Why? One thing, and let's not forget that we are talking about Americans here. They held an election even during the Civil War. Okay? It probably wasn't the fairest of all elections that could have been held, but by anyone's expectations, it was much more fair than anyone thought that would be possible to hold in a situation where there is a raging civil war going on. Yep. And the Americans did that. Lincoln gained a lot of authority, historical credibility by going through that election process. The Americans are not going to accept the excuse that, oh no, we can't have an election because there's a war going on. Yep. It's much more easier for us Europeans to accept that, because I think we have more experience with major wars and more experience.
Many other countries did. Yeah.
So I don't think that the Ukrainians can hold free and fair elections at all. I don't think that the Ukrainians ever held free and fair elections, to be entirely honest with you. But it's certainly not going to be able to hold credible elections during a massive war. So I don't think that there should be either Rada elections or presidential elections. That said, Mr. Zelensky has stayed on despite the ending of his original mandate, and that's going to affect people. The other thing is Donald Trump doesn't like Mr. Zelensky, and that shows. So Donald Trump sort of he's displays an emotional character, right? That's pre-planned. That's a mode of operation. That is how he does diplomacy. That is playing the four-dimensional chess, as our American friends like to say. But it is also very clear that there are people whom he doesn't like. And the more he praises somebody, the less he is likely to like them. I mean, remember when he praised for minutes Ursula von der Leyen as the Empress of Europe? It wasn't because Donald Trump likes Ursula von der Leyen that was damning with false praise. Do you remember when he praises Mr. Zelensky for choosing a fantastic jacket to visit the White House? I mean, anybody who's been near American politics knows that that outfit was completely unacceptable for the White House or for anywhere else in high society in Washington. So he regularly praises Starmer, and we know he hates Starmer. He hates his guts, actually. So his base, Donald Trump's voting base, detects the moods of the president. And if the president doesn't like Zelensky, they are not going to like Zelensky either. Now, there's a completely general additional factor here that we must speak about. It's that over time, people just have enough. And there's going to be people who will say at some point that that's it. I've seen enough of his face. I have seen enough of him trying to convince us to give him more money, more weapons, more. And that just weighs on people, and increasingly many people in the United States, but also in Europe, we're going to say that I've just had enough of this guy. He should just get lost. And that's a big part of this whole problem.
It's quite normal for the American taxpayer to think like that, because obviously they have also a lot of domestic issues to fix, and they need tons of money to do that. And sometimes it's hardly explainable of why you are sending billions abroad when your own people who are paying the taxes and whose billions they actually are are suffering with a lot of everyday stuff and repairing, let's say, the Hawaii Islands after the fires and California after the fires, and this thing happened here and this thing happened there. All they need is money for these cases to be solved, and suddenly you are sending billions abroad. Sometimes it's hard to explain it to the regular taxpayers who are not that familiar with the details of the global diplomacy and different conflicts which unfortunately take place all around the world. But
they just don't care that much about what happened in Ukraine. They don't. And why should they? I've been long saying this since virtually the beginning of this war. If you people all cared a lot less about this devastated, poor country, this war would have been over and people in Ukraine would have been much better.
If you live in Texas, you care about the southern border and you care about your roads and your domestic safety and security and the law and order, restoring the law and order in the big cities. So basically, yeah, it's normal, it's understandable why you don't care about Ukraine that much, but we live very close to it. And overall, in general, what's the case between Hungary and the European Union? Why are you always the bad example, the bad child, the hooligan of the class? Why is that? All the time. Multiple reasons, multiple occasions, and every time, look, oh, Hungary, here's another sanctions, here's another problem, here's another Eurofund stopped, here's another program cancelled because of Hungary.
Because we are the good example. We are the good child. The way we approach the world is what works. Hungarian foreign policy, but domestic policy is based on accepting reality for what it is. And that is why we can identify problems and identify solutions. When it was mass migration, the problem was hundreds of thousands, millions of illegal immigrants rushing the European borders. And the end result of that problem is that you cannot safely walk in the evening in the major Western European cities. Yeah. We've identified that problem. We identified the solution: protect your borders. We did our homework. We protected our borders. That's just one example. In terms of the Ukraine war, and we are going to be justified, worn out by the facts in the end. This is absolutely clear to me. The sooner this war ends, the less bad for Europe and for the Ukrainians. The difference between Hungary and the European Union is that we are a conservative, rational, realist nation state, while Brussels is a dogmatic, imperialistic entity. It believes in its own ideology. It has fallen for its own propaganda. And it approaches the world from an idealist approach. And the idealist, what he does is he looks at the world, he decides how the world should be, then tries to do something about that, fails, and then gets insulted because somebody went a different way and solved the problem the way it is supposed to be solved. That is the philosophical reason here. So they are idealists. Idealists regularly fail because they think that the world should change in order to accommodate their dogma. We are realists who believe that we need to adjust our policies to work within the real world. And these two approaches are in terminal conflict. They're never going to agree with each other. But the second problem is that actually we turned out to be right on every major issue. They turned out to be wrong, and their world is collapsing. Look at France. France is ungovernable. Whatever happens in France and during the next general elections, which are going to happen very soon because this government isn't going to be able to maintain power for weeks, never mind months. When the next general election happens, either the right, our friends Marine Le Pen's party will win, or the Islamo-communists will win. Yeah. Not a good thing, but either way, Macron's technocratic liberals are over. They are over for decades. They are not coming back to France.
Yeah, but you know what the liberals will say? Oh, it's the far right coming. And I know Mr. Bardella in person. I met him actually in your embassy in Washington. And the last thing you think when seeing this sophisticated, well-mannered young man is that he is some far-right radical. He is a radical. He is as far from this as possible. But yeah, the liberals will say, oh, here comes the far-right.
Well, we are far to their right, right? So they are slightly to the left of Fidel Castro. And from that vantage point, looking at us, we are rather far to their right. So
Yeah.
I don't even mind this anymore, to be entirely honest with you. Doesn't matter how they whine, how they moan, how they try to cheat, how they will not not allow Marine Le Pen to win. That's not going to change a damn thing. The technocratic liberal elites are going in France. There's nothing they can do to change that. Not even a civil war. Not even starting a war with Russia, nothing is going to change that.
Yep.
Macron's ideology is dead.
Yep.
And the same thing is going to happen in Germany. The German mainstream is still fighting back, but they are just one cycle behind France. After the next election, Germany is going to become ungovernable, and after the next election, AfD is going to win power. And there is nothing they can do about that.
Yep.
Look at the British polls. There's nothing anybody over there is going to do about stopping Brexit. There's no way to do that because the polls are absolutely clear. The failed policies of this European mainstream are evident for everybody to see. There is no way out for them. This is over. And they've lost their only hope, which was America. And America is not going to back to Obamaism and Bidenism. That's not going to happen. We're going to see a resurgent Democratic Party, but that resurgent Democratic Party is going to embrace democratic populism, and that has nothing to do with what Brussels is.
Yeah, that's what they are saying. Some of the most prolific speakers on the American left are saying we need left populism. We need the Democrats to become populists as well. If you listen to
and they will. If you listen
to Chen Uyghur and some of the prominent speakers of the American left, they are saying we need left populism. We need to beat them in their own game. We need to figure out a popular message, a message that is close to the people and recognized by more and more people. So yeah, they are building now a populist movement within the American left. So yeah, you're very right to say that. But
and that is why they hate Hungary, because we turned out to be right. We are on the right side of history, and they are disappearing. They are losing this fight, and they are correct to identify us Hungarians as those people who started fighting back. We were the ones who started fighting back against them. But if they are wondering who destroyed them, they themselves destroyed themselves. That's not our fault. They did it to themselves.
But back in the days where there was this pretty normal and understandable opposition of the federalization of the European Union, and some federal clerks appointed from somebody and elected by nobody to start ruling the entire union, the antithesis, the political opposition of that was Europe of sovereign nations. Then years go by and people are saying, look, we believe that this concept of Europe of sovereign nations is no longer feasible because after all we are too small and won't chance any of the European nations have on its own against the USA or China or India or anyone on the global field. So we need to reconsider that. What is the new political thesis opposing to the anonymous Brussels federalism by unelected people? What is it? Is it yet once again or again at all the Europe of sovereign nations, or what is it?
It's rational Europe. And it's much closer to the idea of Europe of sovereign nations, because rationally you have to understand that the European member states have their own interests, and you have to just let them work towards their own interests. We have to be able to rationally cooperate in terms of building up certain things that Europe needs in order to survive in the 21st century, especially amongst the crisis of the geopolitical crisis of the 21st century. One of that is a military. We need to be able to build up a military strength that serves as a deterrent to other major forces. It's very important for this to be a deterrent, not an offensive military machine, because an offensive military machine is going to be sooner or later taken over by somebody who wants to build a federal Europe again. It has to be a strong deterrence without being capable of what the American call long-distance power projections. We don't need that. We need is a strong deterrence. That's one. Second, we need to build up an economic base or reform our economic base. We haven't lost it totally. I mean, European competitiveness has been in a horrible state for 2 or 3 years now, but there's a lot of industrial and economic base that survives here in Europe, and we have to reinvigorate that, reimagine the situation we are in right now, and rethink the strategies that will allow us to move forward. And that, unfortunately, I have bad news to everybody who likes Mr. Zelensky very much. That entirely depends on finding a modus vivendi with the Russians. Yep. There's no way to do that without the Russians. All those dreams about green energy and whatnot, they are not going to work either, because you need rare earth metals for that. And guess where you can find it the easiest? Rare earth metals with the Russians. Even if you want to actually, I don't know, change the entire heating conception of Europe, and you want to heat with wood, where's the most wood in the recent vicinity of our European continent? The Russians. You cannot manage to build back European energy security and competitiveness without somehow working with the Russians.
No, they are huge in natural resources. I don't believe that any sane person in the world argues that. So they are huge in natural resources.
You may be able to survive without the Russians, but then you have to have exceptionally good relations with the Middle Easterns, the Arabs, the Muslims, and the Israelis. The Israelis, because of the ports that they control, that they are major trade hubs. And look at what the European elite is doing with the Muslim countries. They are apparently not respectful enough of the LGBTQ community, would you believe? And just look at the insulting, crazy attitude that Brussels, Berlin, Paris, London takes towards Israel. Because they are crazy.
They are.
I mean, the most paramount example of this was when there was the World Cup in Qatar. That was exactly when the Germans were coming off nuclear energy. They were also blocking trade with the Russians, energy trade with the Russians. And you'd think that they would want to be on good terms with the Qataris, but no, they sent their national elf to Qatar to preach them about the gays. Yeah. And then they crashed out of the 3 games from the World Cup to everybody's delight.
Yeah, it's funny with politics sometimes. And yes, the sole fact that the Germans closed all of their nuclear facilities because of some incident, which was basically a natural disaster in Japan with 0 civil victims, is funny up to this day. But
there's 0 parallels with Germany. The situation in Fukushima could not repeat in Germany because there are no nuclear power plants that are remotely like the Fukushima.
Or hardly any tsunamis, or hardly any tsunami waves. Yeah.
Very minimal tsunamis in Germany.
Not so many in history. Okay, and to the end of our conversation, the general politics and the general attitude from Hungary to the European Union, the perception within Hungary of the European Union, and do you even care, or is it hurting you, the perception that Hungary is having all around the European Union and the image that Hungary is having all around the European Union? Is this something that's bothering you? Sorry?
Our image is fantastic. I mean, all the good, reasonable people love us. I'm not even joking. Whenever I go to a conservative conference anywhere on the continent, we are treated like rock stars. We are treated like superheroes who are fighting this immense monster that seems completely unbeatable. But somehow we always slip through the cracks. We kick them, we bite them, but we don't let them get near to us, and we are preserving our own sanity, common sense, and our nation's future in this real world where we all are living, including the crazies in the European Union in Brussels.
That is well confirmed, You are.
The question is important. We think very highly of the European Union. Do you remember this story about Mahatma Gandhi. When he first arrived in London, he was asked what he thought of Western civilization. His reply was that that would be a good idea. A European Union that works would be a marvelous idea. That's what we believe. And we think that we can get there. We can reform the European Union in order for it to work. We just need to change the political paradigm. I hate that word, but there's no better word to be used here. We have to do what Donald Trump is doing right now in the United States and destroy the bureaucratic machine that has taken over, usurped power from the politicians who are actually elected by the people. So a democracy is when you have a political program, you ran in an election where you ask for legitimacy from the voters, and if they provide you with sufficient legitimacy, you form a government, and then you implement your political programs, and these stupid experts and NGOs and I don't know what, they can go away and herd some goats in Afghanistan. Yeah. That's how democracy works, and this is not how the European Union currently works. And that is because of the technocrats sitting in Brussels and European Parliament and the NGOs run by, among others, my favorite person, George Soros. These are the people who are killing the European Union, who are killing European democracy, and who are killing European rule of law. Because what does rule of law mean, by the way? Rule of law to you and I means that the law is clearly written, spelled out, and applies equally to everybody involved. That is not happening in Brussels, right? Just take a look at how they are picking on Hungary all the time, just because we are acting within what is allowed by the European Union treaties. We've never violated those treaties. They can't point to a single issue where we violated those treaties. What they are saying is that we have violated their values. Their values are not spelled out. We don't understand anymore what their values are. But I can tell you, it's certainly not our value to let drag queens into kindergartens, to allow in millions of Muslim migrants, or to fight forever war in Ukraine for no sense whatsoever.
Yeah, not mine neither. But by the way, I think they're suffocating this great idea with their instant, pointless battle of enforcing it on everyone the way they see it. And those examples that you gave are unfortunately part of this woke European idea that we are more and more starting to hate, which is basically suffocating this otherwise great idea of the European Union as a union of peace, union of free trade, union of competition, and free movement of people and goods and capitals and so on and so on. So yeah, it's a great idea, but they're little by little starting to suffocate it. Last point, Prime Minister Orban. Thanks to you guys, I have the honor of meeting him multiple times. Last time there was this acceptance by the Prime Minister. It was dedicated to CPAC Hungary, and I was invited by the Prime Minister's protocol on this event, and I was proudly able to meet him there. And then I posted a picture here in the social network stating only that I had the honor to meet this strong leader. I didn't say good, bad, and this and that. Strong leader. Even if you hate the guy, you cannot deny the fact that he is a strong leader, right? Yeah. Imagine what happened under the picture. This puppet of Putin, this pro-Russian guy, this guy, and this and that. How come the whole fairy tale of Mr. Orban being a puppet of Putin came to life when we are talking about a dissident of the communist regime, someone who suffered a lot from the communist regime, and someone who has never, even by a word, openly supported any of Russia or Putin's policies. What is this thing with Mr. Orban being pro-Putin and pro-Russian and Putin puppet and Trojan horse of Putin in the European Union and so on and so on?
This is crazy, but have I mentioned that the people that we are dealing here, they don't have a very good grasp of reality? Well, that's one of it. Everybody they disagree with is a Putin puppet. or failing that, he is immediately elevated to Hitler. No, I don't know what is worse, Hitler or Putin at this point. These are the crazes, and they would try to do this to everybody whom they meet, who they disagree with. And that's just it, basically. Prime Minister Orban, no, look, here, I suggest that you do something. I mean, it is true that Prime Minister Orban has met with Vladimir Putin on a number of occasions. They have been both in power for quite a long time. Putin not democratically, but Orban has won 4 elections in a row, and he was a prime minister for a term before that at the end of the 90s. They've met several times. Just pick 2 or 3 meetings that they've had. Look at the video without the sound on, and watch their faces. Mr. Putin and Mr. Orban, they don't like each other. They are not happy to be in each other's company. There's certainly a professional respect, mutual respect between these 2 men, but there is no personal chemistry or personal sympathy. Check Mr. Putin and Mr. Trump together. You will immediately see the difference. There is genuine chemistry and personal connection between Putin and Trump and Putin. Check Orban and Trump meetings. There's clearly an affection between the 2.
Oh yes,
people.
They are not just the protocol leader to leader conversations. Yeah, you can see that.
Yeah. It's not just that Orban doesn't personally like being near Putin or like Putin himself. Putin doesn't particularly like Orban on a human level. This relationship is highly professional. There is a lot of professional respect and diplomatic respect between 2 long-serving leaders. But that's it, and you will see it if you watch the videos of any of these meetings.
Okay, we'll check and we'll post some photo shoots from them in our post-production. But yeah, thank you very much for these hints. We will gladly check on them and add them to the video in the post-production. So once again, thank you very much for your time. It was a pleasure talking to you as usual. And I will see you next week on the Pro-Israel Summit. I'm saluting you and your organization for organizing it. So see you next week in Budapest at the Pro-Israel 3rd Annual Pro-Israel Summit in Budapest, Hungary.
Thank you so much for having me, Georgi.
Looking forward to seeing you soon. Thank you also. Bye.